Well, good morning and welcome back to another week on my allotment. And I'm pleased to report that last weekend we got away for an extended weekend to Exmoor National Park. We stayed in a campsite in the village of Dulverton, which is a beautiful place. Yeah, we had a fantastic weekend. It was my wife's birthday and we go there, well, we've been going there for a few years now. They usually have a Christmas market and fireworks. And you know, as is the tradition this year, they cancelled it. I don't quite understand why. It's all outdoors, but anyway, they did. So, but we went walking. We had some lovely weather, and yeah, we had a great time. It really did us the world of good. But this weekend, back on the plot, the golf's shut. I don't know why. It's been taken over by a new chap, a guy called Les, ex-soldier. So there's going to be a lot more chatting going on between here and the driving range, reminiscing as old farts do. And it's early. I was at the garden centre this morning. Yesterday I worked there. It was Thursday morning. It's Friday today, and they're importing Christmas trees from Scandinavia, and the Christmas trees are all packed in brand new untreated wood, and they rip the wood off and dump it at their free woods pile. And I just happened to get there at the right time, and I got a van full of it. And I went up again this morning because I couldn't fit it all in the van, and it had all gone. So somebody else had seen the potential of all that lovely wood. So I was up here yesterday afternoon sawing it and chopping it and stacking it, and I've got more of that to do today. I have to be honest, there is not a lot going on the allotment at this time of year. It really is about titivating, if I can use that word. Excuse the smoke, the fire's on. It's actually choking me. But I thought while there's very little wind, I'd film outside, which makes a nice change. So what am I doing today? Well, I'm going to carry on cutting up this wood, which I won't bore you with. And it's surprising when you've got the stove on all day in the shed, just how much wood it goes through. And I've decided that the cabbages I've got left, we're simply not going to make enough coleslaw. We don't eat a lot of salads in the summer like everybody else. So I've got some small ones on a bed behind me. So the ones over there, 3 red cabbages and 2 green, I'm going to dig them up, dress them and take them down the farm shop. And if, you know, red cabbage this time of year, people tend to eat red cabbage at this time of year. So we'll see what happens with them, and then that gives me access to the remainder of that bed, which I need to raise up and put manure under. People have been accessing the pile of manure and they've dug right into it, and it's beautiful inside. So it's another thing allotments give you, an appreciation of well-rotted manure. So welcome along. It's good to have you here. Not quite sure what I'm going to fill the video with, but I have got some interesting historical facts to pass on to you, which have nothing to do with allotments. And one other thing I've been thinking about, because, you know, I've been sat up here drinking a cup of coffee, passing the time, is water storage. And I'll talk more about that in the shed in a moment. Yes, water. I happen to be diagonally opposite the water trough. Now that water trough is connected to a spring that runs down off the hill down a stream, and there's a pipe running off it like a leat, and it fills the water trough. And when that dries up in the summer, as it has done the last few years, we have a secondary backup system that fills from the main. So it's a good system. We're lucky to have it. It's on every day of the year. We don't have any restrictions on it. But it's a long way to and fro. You know, I must carry tons of water through the summer. And here on my plot, I've got several water buds. You know, they were full in September. as the autumn rains arrived, and they're just trickling out through the outflows now, and I'm wasting probably thousands of gallons of rainwater over the winter that I could store. And even in the summer, if they dry up and I empty them and water, and they don't refill because summer rain isn't as plentiful, well then so be it. But every trip I can avoid simply by having the water on site, it's saved effort. A little bit of work in the beginning to get the barrels and so on. Well, the farmer has these big blue barrels that, I don't know what he keeps in them, but he's an organic farmer. It's not toxic. He's assured us of that. And I've used them. Everybody on site uses them. So I'm thinking of getting him to deliver me some if he could. And I saw a thing about a Bosch submersible pump. And it's, you drop it into the water butt. There's a hose coming off it. It can run up to 25 metres. And I watched a review of it on Steve's Seaside Allotment channel. He was gifted one by Bosch. And it's got real power. He can drop that into one of his water butts and he can water his beds quite reasonably. Like I say, it's got a maximum hose, I suppose on a pump you call it lift, of 25 metres. And I've, in my idle moments, or when I'm pushing a lawnmower or whatever I'm doing this time of year, I'm thinking I can have a bank of those water drums here. So 25 metres down my plot almost gets me to the bottom. If I had another set of water barrels halfway down the plot on those crossway paths, I could fill those with that submersible pump if I bought one. With a battery it comes in at about 130 quid. If you want a second battery it's 50 quid, so and I think each battery lasts, you did say how many litres, but it'll empty a normal sized water butt on one battery. Anyway, it's just something I'm thinking about. Every year, you want, I've had this allotment, this March will be 4 years. It's unrecognisable from when I started. And I just think that would be a huge step forward, limiting the amount of physical effort I have to put in to water distribution. Anyway, food for thought. Little bit of niff-naff and trivia. Something a bit different. I did a story before about a little diving incident I had where I swam into a Tesco trolley. And this one isn't about me, but it is about a good friend of mine who was on his diving course at Gunwharf in Portsmouth, where the Royal Engineer diving establishment used to be. It's now a massive shopping centre and the diving has moved to Halsey Island. But back then he was on his basic diver's course, so he really was learning the trade at the basic level. And along the quayside in Portsmouth Harbour they had several, probably half a dozen, metre cubed concrete blocks sat on the seabed. And it was a very simple task. You just went down a rope which was attached to the concrete block, and when you got there, there was a hydraulic chipping machine, like you see the road, well, they used to, they don't do anymore, but a hydraulic breaker, heavy breaker. And the task was very simple. You stood on the concrete block in your big boots, heavy weighted boots. You picked up the breaker machine and you chipped away at the concrete block, and about an hour later, it was very boring, but it was learning the trade. You chipped away and took off as much concrete as you could, which generally wasn't much, but the water down there was black. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face. You just did everything by feel. Army divers tend to work in those sort of waters. All the more exotic diving is left to the Navy. So this friend of mine was down on this concrete block, and there, the other cubes of concrete, he couldn't see them, but they were just next to him along the quayside, and there were other divers on those blocks doing the same as him, and he's chipping away. And the thing about sound underwater is you can hear sound very well, but you cannot get a direction on it. You lose that sense of direction of sound. Anyway, as he's working away, you can hear this ching, 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 ching. And, you know, he doesn't take a lot of notice of it at first, but as the dive goes on and he's moving around, chipping away, this noise gets more and more irritating, and he puts his hands out and he can't feel, it's not you know, can't feel anything. Anyway, this continues throughout the dive, and at the end he gets a pull on his rope that's tied around his chest, and the signal is sent to come up. So, you know, these big lead boots take some manoeuvring, so he's actually pulled to the surface by the man who's holding his rope. And as he comes up the ladder up onto the quayside, the instructor says, you know, well, I won't say what he said, but my goodness, young Bridges, what have you done to your diving cylinders? Well, on his back are 2 cylinders that he's breathing from, and you've probably seen them on the telly, 2 twin cylinders. When they go on your back, they go on upside down. So the bottom of the cylinders with the manifold is down by your waist, and on the top of the cylinders, which are the bottom of the cylinders, if that makes sense, there are heavy rubber boots to protect them, because when you stand them up, they stand on those rubber boots, and when they go onto your back, it's offered upside down. Anyway, these rubber boots were gouged and mangled, and there were slices in the aluminium of the cylinders. It turns out the bloke on the concrete block next to him was so petrified of being underwater, he'd taken his large diver's knife out and was stood like this, shaking with fear. And in the dark, this bloke, Bridges, his cylinders would swing past in the gloom as he's working on the concrete block next. And this bloke, like that. And, you know, because these things are so big and heavy and Bridges is concentrating on what he's doing, he couldn't feel a thing. But of course, the bottom of those cylinders was right next to his head, which has just got a neoprene hood on it. So, needless to say, Tom Bridges survived to fight another day and went on to have a wonderful career. And this other fella, who shall remain nameless, was removed from the course and didn't become an army diver. But yeah, fascinating. There's no accounting, is there? I mean, I have to admit, there have been times when I'm underwater when I have been scared, you know, but never to that extent. I don't think I've ever drawn my knife in anger. Anyway, it's absolutely tipping down today. Today is Sunday, and as usual, this video is an amalgamation of different clips. It's tipping down out there. Just made my first cup of tea of the day, so cheers and good health to you all. But it hasn't been that wet that much this recently, and recently a few of us, the usual suspects on the site, we get together periodically and we do some sort of communal effort to improve our facilities and our site. 2 years ago, everyone got together and we painted, I mean, I wasn't there that day, but they painted the communal shed, give it a protective coat. And we've done previous other works, and recently we did some more, and I'll show you a few clips of that now. I've moved outside. It's so dark in the shed, even with the lantern on. I can't read from my notes. So I thought I'd do a couple of little other bits of interesting trivia, or I find them interesting. And then I'll show the clips of my plot through the year. I sweep the camera to and fro each month, and it just shows a nice little moment in time of my plot each month. 12 clips as it comes to its most beautiful and most productive, and then as the autumn comes in and we move into winter, it goes back down into dormancy as it is now. So that'll be in a second. I've said before, these glasses were given to me at the fishing lodge up at the Bigsware Estate by some old chap. But I can see out of them, but they are, and this week I trod on them, so now they don't fit on my head properly, and my head's wonky as it is without having, you know, wonky glasses. Do you know, it reminds me of a funny story. When I was a young soldier at the Army Apprentice College here in Chepstow, which is what brought me to this region because I'm originally from Kent, there used to be an old chap who cut our hair. Now, cutting young 16-year-old boy soldiers' hair was never something that was done with care and professionalism. This old bloke used to walk down the massive hangar where we were all learning our various trades and set a chair up, and then each one by one, you know, the 400 or 500 boys would have to sit in a chair, and he never had scissors, he just had clippers, and he just clipped your hair, and the bits he did around your ears and the back of your neck he did with the clippers the other way around, you know, this sort of thing. And he left the stuff on top because it went under your berry, and they always said, I mean, obviously I had hair then. Anyway, this chap had a club foot, and so he had a built up, one shoe was built up by about 4 or 5 inches. So I'm going to go out of view now, but he sort of stood like that. So you sat in the chair, I mean, you didn't get a cloth around you, all the hair clippings just went on your shoulders, and you just had to brush them off because you were wearing coveralls, and you went back to work with hair, you know, all around your shoulders. But of course, because he stood like that, when he cut the back of your hair, it was so when you eventually got back to your accommodation and you looked in the mirror at the back of your hair, well, of course, 16, 17, 18 years old, you're going out of a weekend to meet the local ladies. And the worst thing is to go, you know, people used to laugh at us anyway, us poor young soldiers. Anyway, so some of us, what we would try and do is we'd try and anticipate and think that if we sat in the chair like that, and he was stood behind us like that it might straighten up. Actually, what tended to happen, because he's behind you and you're not quite, you went the wrong way. So the angle of your hair was even worse. Anyway, happy days. I'll tell you another story about pay parade one day. That's the best way of saving money. I'll tell you now. I think it was once a week. It might have been once a month. We didn't have money, but what we had is a pay parade, and you used to form a queue, and the officer from the pay corps would turn up with a table. You'd imagine a pay clerk. He had little neat piles of money, and you were allowed to take an allowance out of your wages that went into a bank account, because we were still children, you know, 16, legally you're not responsible, so the money used to go into a bank account that your parents had set up. So, you know, I think I used to draw out £7 a month, and that was to buy boot cleaning kit and all the stuff you needed, and, you know, a little bit of cash to buy a cup of tea in the naffy if you ever got any time off, which was rare. But you had to march up to this table, and of course it was a very nervous moment because your sergeant was stood there with his pace stick just waiting for you to do something wrong, and then get to the back of the queue, you know. I can remember standing there and my knees were shaking. Silly, I know, but it was a scary time as a young man. Anyway, I marched up, and as you march up, you halt, drive your leg in, salute, hand down, you tell him exactly how much you want, and out of these neat little piles, he would, you know, because the pounds were notes back then, and anyway, you give it. Anyway, I marched up, and as I marched up, I brought my knee up to drive it in, and my knee hit his table, and all his coins scattered. Well, I learnt some new language that day, and needless to say, I wasn't sent to the back of the queue. I was told to go away. Do you know, it took me about 3 months to pluck up the courage to get back in that queue. So I saved a lot of money. And, you know, really good friends of mine. The thing about the army is you make good friends. They lent me money because I was just too scared to go back in that pay parade. Years later, I became that man with the pace stick, shouting at people. How times changed then. I was a much nicer man. Anyway, I've already told you a load of niff-naff, haven't I? The Duke of Montagu placed a bet on the gullibility of the public. I'm steaming up. At 6:30 p.m. on the 16th of January, 1749, according to an advert in a London newspaper, the most amazing magician would appear at the Theatre Royal. 1749. I think this relates to today and the gullibility of the public. The conjurer would perform such feats as giving the name of any masked member of the audience, play music on an ordinary walking stick, turn himself into any person, dead or alive, and finally he would climb into an ordinary sized wine bottle. By 7 p.m. the theatre was packed with crowds still trying to get in. They were told the magician hadn't turned up, and a riot ensued when they realised they'd been made fools of. And that's what's coming to us. In the shadows, the Duke of Montagu watched. He'd just won a bet with Lord Chesterfield that he could fill a theatre by promising the public the impossible. Oh, this isn't really a funny one. Boston, in Massachusetts, is that right, Massachusetts? Witnessed a toffee apple tsunami. On Wednesday the 15th, 1919, in Boston, a 90-foot wide cast iron tank containing 2.5 million gallons of crude molasses for rum manufacturing exploded. The tank, belonging to the US Industrial Alcohol Company, was set 50 feet above street level. Its entire contents spilled within a few seconds with no warning. The resulting thick, sticky wall of molasses, which at times was 15 feet high, ran through the streets at 35 miles per hour. It demolished buildings, carried off vehicles and drowned horses. People who tried to outrun the wave were engulfed and drowned. 21 people were killed and 150 injured. Arriving at hospital, they looked like toffee apples, witnesses said. The clean-up took weeks, and for decades after, locals claimed they could smell molasses in hot weather. That's quite remarkable. What a frightening thing to happen. It reminds me a bit of those poor seabirds you see after an oil spill where they're sticky and gunged and, you know, volunteers are trying to clean them up. And the last one, the man who sold the Eiffel Tower. In 1925, Victor Lustig convinced local Parisian scrap metal dealers that the Eiffel Tower was rusting and was to be sold for scrap. The Eiffel Tower was only meant to be up for 20 years. So that is not completely unfeasible. I mean, that's the beauty of any scam. It's got to have a ring of truth. Posing as a government official, Lustig sold the tower to the highest bidder for $350 million. $350 million. Shows you how much scrap metal is worth, doesn't it? He was never reported to the authorities because the scrap metal dealer was too embarrassed to tell police. Interestingly, 10 years later, Lustig in 1935 was sentenced to 20 years in Alcatraz. He was an American. After being caught in New York masterminding a counterfeiting operation so big it threatened to shake confidence in the US economy. Do you know what struck me about that story is, why would he go on doing things like that when he's just got himself 350? I mean, that's a lot of money now, but back in, you know, the early part of the 20th century. Anyway, absolutely fascinating. Yeah. Anyway, I'm still laughing about my pay parade. I'd forgotten about that. Yeah, it's much easier going to the bank nowadays, isn't it? So let's go and have a look at my allotment through the year. January. February. March.
April.
May. June. July. August. September. October. November. December. Well, there's me saying that there's not much happening on the allotment, and of course there isn't, but this has happened since we last saw each other, and that's obviously my broad beans that were in the greenhouse. I brought them up here, put them in the cold frame, left the cold frame doors open or ajar to harden them off, and they don't seem to have suffered any sort of transplant shock. The only shock was for me to come here the day after I'd planted them and find that one of them had been bitten off and just left to lie there. I'm guessing that's mice or rats, but why they'd nip it off and then not eat it, I don't know. However, obviously the glass is there to keep the worst of the frosts off. And you know, it's early days, they've only been out a week or more. However, so far so good. They seem to have survived the few frosts we've had recently, and the glass is just a little bit of minimal protection, and because of the fence there, the prevailing winds are eased, so I have high hopes, optimistic as ever, that these, my third year of trying, might make it through till spring. We shall see. Is it Aqua Dolce Claudia? Is that what it's called? I think a specific overwintering variety. And these are coming out this morning. I'm not sure if anyone's going to want to buy them, but I'll see what they look like once I've given them a scrub up. The pond has had its autumn tidy up, everything cut back, and the all the lilies and so on have been, the pots there, one of the aqua pot things with mesh. I've brought each one of those out individually and trimmed the roots, because the roots go crazy and congest the pond, so they've all been pruned and put back in, and the surrounding vegetation cut back. So pleased that that looks tidy. So apart from the cabbages that are coming out today, what else is in the ground? Well, I've got a set of leeks here, the garlic, and then another set of leeks a little bit further down beyond those blackcurrant bushes. I also love the sight of that smoke billowing from the shed. It sort of says, come on in, it's lovely in here. The two leaf mould bins there and that one there are both full to the brim, bursting, so I need to leave it a couple of weeks and then I can bring some more leaves, because they always drop down and compact. And then here I've got some overwintering onions which aren't doing a lot. Last year I tried to overwinter onions, and in the spring when I had a good look at them, they were rotten. The bulbs had just squished. So we shall see with these. They've got two hopes. Well, there's the outer leaf coverings to get rid of all the worms and slugs that might be inside them. I've cleaned these up, and the red cabbages are beautiful. However, to take to the farm shop, that sort of discoloration, whilst that's fine for us, and I'll chop that up and make coleslaw, I don't think that will sell in a farm shop. Whereas, give these a bit of a wipe, and they come up lovely. So they pass the test, and they'll go down the farm shop now. Well, I'm going to call that a day. As far as the day is concerned up here, it's still quite early, but there's nothing worth showing you on the video. Cheryl has asked me to take some Brussels sprouts and one leek home, so I will do that. But I've had a wonderful year on my allotment. This year, with all the silliness that's gone on, has taught me one thing. Well, it's taught me a few things, that's not true. But as far as the allotment goes, it has reinforced for me, as if I needed it, that this allotment is a wonderful place. And when all the madness is going on out there, I can come here with a few like-minded friends and enjoy my time, forget the silliness of the human species, and just gladden my heart. And the byproduct of that is wonderful fruits and vegetables. So to all of you who have allotments, I wish you a good growing year in 2021. And to everyone, whether you have an allotment, a vegetable garden or not, I wish you, and I genuinely mean this, I wish you all the best in 2021. I hope I'm wrong, and I hope that this all recedes and we can go back to normal. I really do. But I think vaccine freedom passes and more restriction of liberties are coming if the British public don't start to stand up and say enough is enough. I will not comply. So, good luck, have a lovely Christmas, Have a wonderful new year. I suspect in lockdown. And I look forward to seeing you in 2021 and living through and laughing at whatever happens. Thanks for watching. Thanks for all those who've subscribed this year and the years before. And I shall see you early next year. Take care. Look after yourselves. Bye for now.